Hi, today I am talking about the book Trinity by Tom DeLonge and AJ Hartley. This is Tom DeLonge and AJ Hartley's newest collaboration, although they do have a new book coming out this October called Time Rider, but this came out last year in June, and I finally recently read it. I had been really excited to read it, and I must say I really enjoyed this. So I'm going to explain the category and genre. So as for category, on AJ Hartley's website, this is listed as one of his adult books, but I honestly think it's more young adult. Like, there are a few different perspectives which I'll get into. The main perspective is of a teenager. Now, yes, he's 18, but like, this story very much involves teenagers who are still in high school. So I feel like this is more young adult, and there are like adult characters, but I guess I could see how this could be considered adult. I would personally rather call it more young adult, especially when it comes to the ages of the characters. And then this is considered science fiction. It's considered historical fiction because it takes place in the past. I'll get to that later as well. And it is also considered a thriller, which, yes, I agree with all those terms for this book. So this book is a standalone that takes place in 1962 in the fictional town of Trinity, Nevada. I really liked the setting and time period. I enjoy reading about stuff that takes place in the past or stuff that was just published in the past. That's not the case for this. This was published last year. But I can definitely tell that a lot of research was done. So I guess this story is based on real events to some extent. Of course, I don't really know which exactly is which. I am not really an expert on this subject. I know for some people reading this book and the other books like Secret Machines and stuff, they'll be like, I already knew everything in this book. I did not, because I don't know as much about this topic. So there are a few different perspectives that this book alternates between, but the main character, and it's pretty easy to tell that he's the main character, is an 18-year-old boy named Van. He lives with his father, and he has a brother who's 2 years younger than him named Andy. And Van has been living in Nevada for most of his life. He did live in New Mexico when he was younger, which that location is definitely very connected to this in terms of the things that happen. So that's very important. But yeah, now he lives in this town, which is like a desert town, and I think that a really good job was done describing what this town is like. And I guess it's like kind of known for being a test site for atomic bombs, which is what a lot of this is about. And so the plot of this is basically there's going to be a test done, which a lot of people in the town are very interested in. Some people have different opinions. Van and Andy's father is very, like, according to them, paranoid, and he seems to be in a strange state that they don't really understand. And he seems to be particularly worried about, like, being watched by the government. And they don't really understand that, but they love their father anyway. They have, like, a bit of a strained relationship with him, I would say, but they certainly don't hate him. And so there are definitely some mysteries in this. There are definitely some things I was curious about, especially, like, their father and why he behaves the way he does, and some other things with their family, and other things to do with the town. So basically there's going to be this atomic bomb testing, and after it happens is really what most of the story is about. There is a recurring dream that Van has been having for a very long time, and it really fascinates him, and he can't really get it out of his mind. And his father seems particularly concerned about the test that is going to happen, but the town is ultimately, I guess I would say, excited about it. And then once the test happens, so I want this to be a spoiler-free review, so I can't really say too much, but basically, like, stuff happens. People see things they weren't supposed to see. People are on the run. People are curious. So yeah, there are a few mysteries involved in this, and they're kind of all connected, at least to an extent, and the main plot of this is just about the test and what happens afterwards. So I really enjoyed this. I felt that from the first chapter it was great, because the first chapter introduced the main character and his family, the setting, and described it well. The time that this took place in, the main character's interests. So he is 18, but still in high school. He's only got a little bit of high school left, and he's not quite sure what he wants to do. He is interested in art. As I said, he does have that recurring dream, which is related to everything that's going on in a way. And so he likes to draw things inspired by that. And what the first chapter does is it also introduces some of the mysteries. There were definitely things that I was invested in and intrigued by. I liked that Van was someone who didn't believe in, like, the supernatural and things like that. I think that was great. I think it could help the reader relate more, especially if they're someone going into this who is the same way. It can give them some relatability. Like when I've read from these two creators before, I feel like they introduce these concepts in a way that is easy to understand, where they get on your level first instead of just bombarding you with information. They create a story that you care about, and I definitely really cared about these characters. More on that later, but I think they do a great job at expressing these ideas. I'd say it does start out a bit slow. I think it makes sense because they're really introducing everything, and I did care in the beginning, definitely, but it definitely picks up about halfway through. And then if you felt that there was not much going on at first, you might be like, now there's too much going on. Not that I felt like that, but just it does get to a point where a lot is happening, and it actually did feel a bit scary and suspenseful and thrilling. And there are very high stakes in this. Some wild stuff happens in this. Again, this is a spoiler-free review, so I'm not going to give too many details. But yeah, there is also a gang in this book of 4 boys. They're either teenagers or young adults. And they, like, I was going to say, like, the bullies are actually intimidating, but I don't know if bully is even the right word for them. Like, yeah, they can be considered that. They're, like, actually a gang. They're, like, actually dangerous. Some of the things that they say and do, it's like, whoa, okay, that's intense. I loved the relationship between Van and his brother Andy. I thought it was really sweet. Their relationship with their dad was interesting too, especially because you don't really know what happened to him. I was pretty invested in the relationships that the characters had with each other, and I liked their interactions with each other. Some of this is definitely emotional. There's a, like, local radio guy who takes in callers and talks with them about things, and as Van listens to it, he thinks a lot of it is just, like, nonsensical conspiracy theory stuff. But that was an interesting part of the book. I enjoy A.J. Hartley's writing, and in this book I found it to be quite descriptive. Also, I guess the words that came to my mind were metaphorical / poetic. I think he's very good at describing things, and I know that characters are very important to him, like really developing the characters and getting you to care about them instead of just focusing completely on plot and twists and things like that. So yeah, I think he has a great writing style. I've really enjoyed him, and I will get into later in this video the other books I have read by these authors. This book definitely had some interesting and, in my opinion, great lessons and messages. This book contains some, I guess you could say, big ideas, things about the government, things that these characters learn and find out. Because of the setting and the things with the gangs and stuff, this did remind me a bit of The Outsiders, which I read 5 years ago, and I really liked that book when I read it. So I did like that it reminded me of that, but this is ultimately very different from that. So yeah, as I said, I really cared about the characters. That's very important to me in a book. I want to care about the characters. I need to have a reason to root for them, to want them to achieve whatever they're trying to achieve. If something happens to them, I want them to be okay, or if they're supposed to be unlikable, then if something bad happens to them, I'm supposed to like that. And in this book, there were definitely some characters where, because like I said, some wild stuff happens in this book, so there were some characters where I really hoped that they would be okay. So I was definitely invested. There were definitely some questions I had, like wondering if certain things would be resolved. And that's good when you're reading and you care about what happens and you have questions that you want answered. I read this book kind of slowly to really just process and understand everything in it. I felt that this book definitely made me think about some things. It's not the easiest to read, not like it's poorly written at all, but just sometimes I guess like a lot can be going on, or like a lot of things are being described. So I did want to just take my time and really get it all in. This doesn't always happen, but this was one of those books where I really looked forward to reading more of it each time I did. Sometimes a book is just like whatever I'm currently reading and I'm like, yeah, I guess I'll read some more of that. But this book I was really invested in. I was definitely curious, also a little nervous because like I said, I cared about the characters so much and their relationships with each other that I wouldn't really put it off, but I would be like a little nervous to keep reading because like I really cared about them. So yeah, I loved this. It was definitely a 5-star read for me. Now I want to compare it to other books that are similar to this, like Secret Machines, so I'm going to pull those out and tell you a little bit about that, especially if maybe you've read those and you're curious how this ties in with those books, maybe if you haven't read this, or maybe you haven't read any of Tom DeLonge's books and you're like curious where to start. In that case, I'm happy to help you with that. So here are the 2 Secret Machines books, also written with A.J. Hartley. So these 2 are connected, of course, this is a series. But Trinity is a standalone, as I said earlier in this video, so you definitely don't have to read Secret Machines first to understand this. I saw some people mention that there was like a slight reference or something like that in Trinity to Secret Machines, and I think I noticed what it was. And it is ultimately about the same general topic of UFOs and all that. So it is similar subject matter, but it does take place more in the past. Well, Secret Machines kind of takes place all over, but ultimately I'd say it's in the present. But yes, Trinity is its own separate thing. It is just a standalone, so there aren't going to be any sequels to it. I have heard about it potentially becoming a movie someday. I think that's what To the Stars is going to try to do, but they've also got like so many other projects going on, I don't know. But if there will be a movie of this, I would definitely like to watch that. I think I would enjoy that. I think it would be really cool to see. But yes, while it is similar to Secret Machines in terms of the writing style and the general theme, you definitely don't have to read these first. And Trinity is quite short. It's just a little under 300 pages, whereas these books are quite large, though I will say they look big, but in my opinion they're good and fast-paced. And the biggest thing is, honestly, for me in a book, page count doesn't mean much. It's all about the text size. And you can see that the text is actually kind of big. It may not look big, but it's a lot bigger than in other books. Though in the sequel, it's smaller. I think this book is actually longer than the first one. It just looks smaller, but I believe the audiobook is longer too. This is probably ultimately more words. So I did enjoy these very much when I read them. Honestly, I think I might have liked Trinity a little more. I think I felt more connected to the characters, more relatable, because I think that their ages and just professions were a little closer to mine in terms of, like, I was a high school student not that long ago. I'm not, like in Secret Machines, a military pilot or a British woman whose father was a very successful businessman or a journalist online. I mean, what I do is kind of similar to that, but yeah, I wasn't any of like the people in there. So this was definitely more relatable, and I think it ultimately would be more relatable for some people because they can relate to being a teenager in high school. So yeah, Trinity may be a good place to start if you haven't read any of Tom DeLonge's books. I mean, I know that Secret Machines is, like, as I heard it described by another YouTuber, like the flagship series from To the Start. It's definitely like the big one, quite literally. Yeah, you don't have to read any others to understand this one, and it is ultimately related, but not like part of the same series or anything. And after finishing Trinity, I started reading the first Poe Anderson book for the first time. I'm only a little way into it, but I am enjoying it so far, and it's quite different from his work with AJ Hartley, so yeah, that's been fun to finally dive into. So yeah, I felt that this book absolutely took me on a journey, and I enjoyed my time with it. Oh, and I did also want to mention other books by AJ Hartley I have read. Actually, there's just one. So I have read his book Cold Bath Street. So Secret Machines were the first books of his that I read, but I was interested enough by him, and I have become quite the fan of him as well. I follow his YouTube channel. I think it's really interesting. I follow him elsewhere too. So I have read Cold Bath Street. Read this last year and I really enjoyed it. This is a young adult historical fiction ghost story. I did a review of it if you would like to know more about it. I have playlists on my channel for, well, I have one that's all my book reviews. I have playlists divided by category, so this would be in young adult. I have a couple other books of his, and there are so many books of his on my TBR right now. I want to read maybe not all of them, but most of them for sure. Like, a lot of them sound really interesting, and some of them do sound a bit intimidating. Some of them are books that sound like books I haven't really read that kind before, but from what I've read of him so far, I trust that they will probably be pretty good. So yeah, AJ Hartley has definitely become one of my favorite authors. I think that he and Tom DeLonge work really well together in terms of creating these stories that you care about, that present information and ideas in an easy to understand way. You can let me know if you've read anything by either of these authors. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. I really look forward to Time Rider. I know that one's going to be a bit longer, about maybe not twice the size of this, but close to that at least. And I do plan on getting some more books from To the Stars quite soon. Plan on making an order from their actual website. The books from the company I've gotten so far, I got elsewhere. But yeah, I definitely plan on getting some more of those. I definitely want to read all their books. So yeah, thank you for watching.